Patek Philippe produces somewhere between 60 and 70,000 watches per year. Rolex makes over 1 million. That restraint isn't accidental. It is the foundation of everything that the brand stands for. And the result is a catalog that runs from a $27,000 steel sports watch all the way up to a $3.2 million grand complication containing 1,366 movement components and 20 complications. Today, we're going to be running all 25 of the most important references in that catalog for 2026. Prices, secondary market data, what each watch actually represents, and the specific reason that each one belongs on this list. Let's start. Number 1, Aquanaut stainless steel, reference number 5167A001. If there's one Patek that captures what the brand has become to a new generation of collectors, it's this one. The 5167A is 40 millimeters of stainless steel with a rounded octagonal bezel, an embossed black dial, and a composite tropical strap with a fold-over steel clasp. It wears lighter than it looks, it sits flat on the wrist, and it has a casual confidence that the more formal references in the catalog don't attempt. The caliber 324 SC automatic inside runs to 45 hours of power reserve with full Geneva seal finishing across every component. What the secondary market tells you, trading between 45 and 60 grand against a $27,257 retail, is that the Aquanaut has become the younger collector's answer to the Nautilus. Less formal, equally prestigious, and significantly harder to source at retail than the price would suggest. The gap between what Patek charges and what the market pays isn't closing, it's growing. Number 2, Calatrava Clau du Paris, reference number 6119G001. The hobnail Clau du Paris bezel pattern first appeared on a Calatrava in 1934. 9 decades later, it is still the detail that stops the room. Not loudly, but in the way that rewards a second look. The 6119G is 39 millimeters of 18 karat white gold with a slim profile, a silver opaline dial with applied gold markers, and small seconds positioned at 6 o'clock. The movement inside, the caliber 3255 PS, is manual winding with 65 hours of power reserve and Geneva seal finishing at a standard that becomes clear the moment you look through the sapphire display case back. The hand-stitched alligator strap and white gold buckle are the final details that complete a watch that is built for people who've stopped needing to explain their taste. At $37,510 retail and trading between 40 and 50 grand on the secondary market, the 6119G is modest in its appreciation, but this isn't a watch you're going to buy for rapid secondary market returns. You buy it because it's the Calatrava in its most historically grounded modern form. Number 3, Golden Ellipse green dial, reference number 5738G001. In 1968, Patek Philippe applied the golden ratio to a watch case, the mathematical proportion that appears in Nautilus shells, Renaissance paintings, and classical architecture, and produced one of the most harmonically considered designs in watchmaking history. The 5738G brings that geometry into 2026 in 18 karat white gold with a sunburst green dial that changes character completely under different light. Baton hands, applied indices, and no date complication interrupting the visual logic. The caliber 240 ultra-thin automatic uses a peripheral micro rotor, a small oscillating wade at the edge of the movement rather than a full-sized rotor through the center, which is why the case sits at an almost implausible slimness on the wrist. 48 hours of power reserve in a movement that barely exists. At $43,011 retail and trading between 45 and 55 grand secondary, the green dial adds a contemporary dimension to a case shape that hasn't needed changing since the year that it was introduced. Number 4, Calatrava Weekly Calendar, reference number 5212A001. There are very few wristwatches in the world that display the ISO 8601 week number, and this is one of them. And the fact that it does so in a handwritten style font on a stainless steel Calatrava is the kind of design decision that makes collectors look twice. and then a third time. The 5212A is 40 millimeters of polished stainless steel, itself unusual in the Calatrava line, which typically runs in precious metal, with a silver opaline dial carrying central day, date, and week number indications in that distinctive handwritten typography. The caliber 26330 SCJ SC automatic handles the complication on approximately 45 hours of power reserve, with Geneva seal finishing throughout. The calf skin strap with steel buckle completes a package that reads casual elegant in a way that most dress watches can't manage. At $43,136 retail and trading between $45 and $55,000 on the secondary market, the 5212A is the Calatrava that rewards collectors who read beyond the obvious references. Number 5. Calatrava Textured Dial, reference number 5226G001. The Calatrava is Patek's purest dress watch, which makes the 5226G an interesting proposition because it takes that purity and it disrupts it in exactly the right way. 18 karat white gold, 40 millimeters, with a grainy textured anthracite dial that has a physical depth to it under light. The surface isn't smooth, it's worked. And the way it catches and scatters illumination, it gives it a character that standard lacquer dials don't achieve. The caliber 26330 SC automatic inside runs to 45 hours of power reserve. The calfskin strap with white gold buckle is restrained in exactly the way that the dial isn't. At $47,262 retail and trading between $50 and $65,000 on the secondary market, the 5226G is showing stronger appreciation than most of its Calatrava siblings. Because collectors who want a Calatrava with genuine visual personality, well, they have limited options. And this is the most compelling one currently in production. All right, number 6, Calatrava Platinum. Reference number 6196P001. Platinum is heavier than gold, it's rarer than gold, and it requires more complex manufacturing than gold. It's also the material that signals the highest tier of restraint in watchmaking, because platinum doesn't announce itself. It just sits there, slightly cooler in tone than white gold, denser on the wrist, and meaningful only to the person who knows what they're looking at. The 6196P is 39 millimeters of platinum with a blue sunburst dial, applied indices, and small seconds at 6 o'clock. The caliber 3255 PS inside is manual winding, 65 hours of power reserve, which means that the ownership experience includes a daily ritual of winding that connects you to the movement in a way that automatics don't. The hand-stitched alligator strap with platinum buckle is finished to the same standard as the case. Sapphire crystal front and case back. At $52,013 retail and trading between $55 and $70,000 on the secondary market, the Platinum Calatrava is the material upgrade that the dress watch collector makes when, well, they've decided that they're done compromising. All right, number 7, Golden Ellipse Rose Gold, reference number 57381R001. Everything that the 5738G represents in white gold and leather, this reference elevates by one significant step. The strap becomes a bracelet, and the case material becomes 18 karat rose gold. The integrated rose gold bracelet is the detail that transforms the Golden Ellipse from a dress watch into a jewelry-grade timepiece. The links follow the elliptical logic of the case, connecting seamlessly at the lugs in a way that makes the whole piece read as a single designed object, rather than a case that happens to have a strap attached. The blue sunburst dial with baton hands sits inside 34.5 by 39.5 millimeters of rose gold at a thickness that makes it almost impossibly elegant on the wrist. The caliber 240 ultra-thin automatic with micro rotor provides 48 hours of power reserve. At $68,017 retail and trading between $70 and $85,000 on the secondary market, the bracelet version of the Golden Ellipse commands a meaningful premium over the strap version. Because collectors who understand integrated bracelets know that achieving them at this level of finishing is significantly more difficult than it appears. All right, number 8. Complications Flyback Chronograph, reference number 59051A001. A stainless steel Patek with a flyback chronograph and annual calendar on an integrated bracelet in an olive green dial. That combination shouldn't exist at this price, and yet, here it is. The 59051A is 42 millimeters of stainless steel with a sporty brushed and polished finish. That olive green sunburst dial displaying 3 apertures for day, date, and month alongside the chronograph subdial at 6. The flyback function means that the chronograph hand resets and restarts in a single push, rather than requiring stop, reset, start, a complication with roots in aviation timing. The caliber CH28520QA24H handles both the flyback chronograph and annual calendar simultaneously, running to approximately 45 hours of power reserve. The integrated steel bracelet with folding clasp completes the sports watch brief. At $71,643 retail and trading between $75 and $95,000 on the secondary market, the 59051A demonstrates the premium the market assigns to steel-cased Patek complications, a premium that hasn't softened. All right, number 9, Aquanaut Travel Time, reference number 5164G001, the most practically useful Aquanaut in the current catalog, and the one that makes the strongest case for the line as something more than a casual sports watch. White gold, 40.8 millimeters, with the embossed black dial carrying dual time indicators and day-night apertures for both local and home time zones. The push buttons at 2 and 4 o'clock adjust the local time hour independently without stopping the movement, which means that you can change time zones mid-flight without disrupting the watch's running. The black composite tropical strap with white gold fold-over clasp adds the casual confidence that the Aquanaut line's built around. At $71,643 retail and trading between $80 and $100,000 on the secondary market, the travel time commands a meaningful premium over the base Aquanaut because the dual time complication in precious metal is scarce, and scarcity in the Patek ecosystem has a consistent outcome. Number 10. Nautilus Travel Time Chronograph, reference number 59901A011. 2 major complications, flyback chronograph and dual time zone, simultaneously inside a steel Nautilus on an integrated bracelet. Now, the secondary market's response to that combination has been unambiguous. The 59901A is 40.5 millimeters of stainless steel with the iconic rounded octagonal bezel. A blue sunburst dial displaying the chronograph subdial, dual time indicators, day-night apertures, and date at 12. The integrated steel bracelet with folding clasp is the same format that defines the Nautilus line's visual identity. At $76,895 retail and trading between $120 and $150,000 on the secondary market, consistently, since introduction, the 5990 is the reference that proves what the market will pay for steel-cased Patek complications. Nearly double retail. Steadily. That's not a spike, that's a floor. Number 11. Nautilus White Gold, reference number 58111G001. The 5711 was discontinued in 2021. The watch community treated the announcement as a cultural event. Waiting lists evaporated. Secondary prices for the stainless steel three-hander approached and exceeded the white gold 5811 that followed it. The 5811 had the unenviable task of being the successor to one of the most discussed Pateks in the history of the brand. But it handles that task well. 41 millimeters of 18-karat white gold with a gradient blue sunburst dial. Slightly more pronounced gradient than the 5711. Applied indices, date at 3, and the caliber 26330 SC automatic running to 45 hours of power reserve. The integrated white gold bracelet flows into the case in the way that only Patek's integrated bracelets do. Sapphire crystal front and case back. At $82,021 retail, and trading between $120 and $160,000 on the secondary market, the 5811 has established its own appreciation trajectory separate from the 5711 mythology. It's building its own story now, and it's building it consistently upward. Number 12. Grand Complications Inline Perpetual Calendar, reference number 5236P010. In 2021, Patek Philippe did something with the perpetual calendar that no wristwatch had done before. Displayed the day, date, and month in a horizontal linear format across the dial rather than in the traditional subdial arrangement. The inspiration was vintage pocket watches where linear displays were more common. The engineering challenge of making it work in a wristwatch movement was entirely new. The 5236P010 is 41.3 millimeters of platinum, slim profile with a blue sunburst dial carrying that inline display at the top of the dial face and moon phase at 6. The display is more legible than traditional tri-register perpetual calendars because the information is read left to right rather than divided across the dial. At $85,000 to $152,861 retail and trading between $140,000 and $180,000, this is technical innovation with an immediate appreciation premium. Number 13, Complications World Time, reference number 5330G001. The World Time complication at Patek dates back to 1937 when Louis Cartier developed the mechanism that allowed all 24 time zones to be read simultaneously from a single dial. The 5330G brings that heritage forward and adds something entirely new. A patented synchronized date mechanism that automatically corrects the date when the local time city ring is advanced across midnight. That synchronized date correction is a genuine technical problem that Patek solved in 2023 that no other manufacturer had previously addressed in a world time wristwatch. The 5330G is 40 millimeters of 18 karat white gold with a blue opaline dial carrying a world map at center, a city ring, and a 24-hour day-night ring. The date subdial at 12 reads the local date rather than requiring manual adjustment. At $86,647 retail and trading between $95,000 and $120,000 on the secondary market, the 5330G is the most practically useful of Patek's world time references. And the only one where changing time zones doesn't require remembering to correct the date manually. All right, number 14, Aquanaut Chronograph, reference number 5968G001. The Aquanaut line has always been about casual confidence. A Patek that doesn't take itself too seriously on the surface while hiding serious credentials underneath. The 5968G takes that personality and adds a flyback chronograph, which is both the most practically useful and visually dramatic complication that you can put in a sports watch. White gold, 42.2 millimeters with a khaki green embossed dial. The texture reads differently under light than a standard lacquer surface, shifting between matte and dimensional depending upon the angle. The composite tropical strap in matching khaki green with a white gold foot over clasp completes a package that feels entirely coherent. Every element in the same design language. At $88,898 retail and trading between $95,000 and $120,000 on the secondary market, the 5968G is the most complex Aquanaut in current production, and the market has responded accordingly. All right, number 15. Complications Manual Chronograph, reference number 5172G010. There is a particular kind of collector who gravitates towards manual winding chronographs, and the argument that they make is compelling. No automatic rotor or intermediary between your hand and the main spring. You wind it, you time things, and the connection between wearer and movement is as direct as mechanical watchmaking allows. The 5172G010 makes that case in 18 karat white gold at 41 millimeters with a salmon dial, that warm, slightly rose gold tone that collector culture has long associated with vintage Patek dress watches, carrying applied Arabic numerals and a tachymeter scale around the chapter ring. At $97,150 retail and trading between $110,000 and $140,000 on the secondary market, the salmon dial and manual wind combination commands one of the strongest premiums in the complications line. Number 16, Nautilus Rose Gold, reference number 57121R001. The 5712 is the Nautilus that does more. And in rose gold, it does it at a price that the secondary market has decided is significantly undervalued. 40 millimeters of 18 karat rose gold with an integrated bracelet, a brown sunburst gradient dial carrying 4 additional functions alongside the time: power reserve indicator, moon phase, date, and small seconds, 48 hours of power reserve. The combination of moon phase and power reserve on the same dial creates an information-rich layout that reads legibly because Patek's dial designers understand hierarchy. At $97,650 retail and trading between $150 and $200,000 on the secondary market, the 57121R represents the largest gap between retail and secondary of any reference in this price tier. A rose gold integrated bracelet Nautilus with 4 complications. The market's pricing of that combination is clear and consistent. Number 17. Aquanaut Luce Travel Time, reference number 5269200R001. The Luce designation within the Aquanaut line signals a specific execution, diamond bezel, precious metal integrated bracelet that transforms the sports watch DNA of the Aquanaut into something that sits at the intersection of haute horlogerie and fine jewelry. Rose gold, 38.8 millimeters, with 70 diamonds set into the bezel at approximately 1.1 carats total. White lacquered dial with the embossed Aquanaut motif, dual time indicators for local and home time, and day-night apertures for both zones. The integrated rose gold bracelet, produced to the same standard as the case, connects the piece from wrist to crown without a single visual break. At $101,421 to $135,300 retail, and trading between $140,000 and $170,000 on the secondary market, the Luce Travel Time sits at the meeting point of complication and jewelry, a category that Patek has made specifically its own in the Aquanaut line. Number 18. Calatrava Volutes and Arabesques, reference number 5088-100P001. This is not a watch where the movement is the story, the case is the story. 38.6 millimeters of platinum, every surface of which has been hand engraved by Patek's dedicated engraving atelier with volutes and arabesque patterns. Continuous, scrolling organic forms that fill the bezel, the lugs, and the case band entirely. The engraved channels are filled with black enamel, which requires firing at high temperature and polishing back to flush. A process repeated multiple times until the surface is perfectly level. The result is a case that functions as wearable sculpture. Inside, the caliber 240 automatic with micro rotor provides 48 hours of power reserve in a package that reads quietly from across the room and overwhelmingly up close. At $114,391 retail and trading between $130,000 and $160,000 on the secondary market, the 5088-100P is the purest expression of Patek's belief that a watch case can be a work of art without any complication beyond telling the time beautifully. Number 19. Nautilus Perpetual Calendar, reference number 57401G001. Engineering a perpetual calendar into the Nautilus case required Patek to develop a movement specifically for the dimensional constraints of that integrated bracelet design. The standard perpetual calendar caliber wouldn't fit, so they made one that would. White gold, 40 millimeter, with a blue sunburst dial carrying perpetual calendar subdials for day, date, month, and moon phase. 5 separate calendar indications running from a single automatic movement that requires no manual correction until the year 2100. The integrated white gold bracelet flows into the case with the same precision as the standard Nautilus, only the movement inside is categorically more complex. At $178,045 retail, and trading between $250,000 and $350,000 on the secondary market, the 57401G is the reference with the most dramatic percentage appreciation on this entire list. 40 to 96% above retail, consistently. A perpetual calendar inside a Nautilus has no equivalent anywhere in watchmaking at any price. All right, number 20. Cubitus Perpetual Calendar, reference number 5840P001. The Cubitus is the newest line in Patek's catalog, introduced in 2023 with a rectangular case that has softened corners, an integrated bracelet, and a design language that sits between the Nautilus's octagonal architecture and the Golden Ellipse's mathematical elegance. This perpetual calendar execution in platinum is the most technically ambitious Cubitus currently in production. The blue sunburst dial carries the full perpetual calendar: day, date, month, leap year, and moon phase. The same caliber 240Q that powers the Nautilus Perpetual, now adapted for the rectangular case dimensions. The platinum case and strap buckle give it a weight and presence that the steel Cubitus references don't have. At $187,547 retail and trading between $220 and $280,000 on the secondary market, the Cubitus Perpetual is building its collector story from a baseline that the market is still establishing, which means that the appreciation potential as the line matures is real and currently unpriced. Number 21, Calatrava Chiming Alarm, reference number 5322G001. Alarm complications in mechanical watchmaking are rare. Chiming alarm complications, where the alarm sounds through a hammer and gong mechanism rather than a buzzer, are rarer still. The 5322G is the first Calatrava to carry one, introduced in 2024, and the movement required to make it work took years of development. White gold, 40 millimeters, with a blue sunburst dial carrying the alarm subdial at 12 and the date at 6. An on-off indicator tells you at a glance whether the alarm is armed. The caliber AL3660 automatic manages both the timekeeping and alarm functions, with the gong mechanism tuned specifically for the acoustic properties of the white gold case. Different materials resonate differently, and Patek engineered the case geometry around the sound that it produces. At $281,321 retail and trading between $300 and $350,000 on the secondary market, the 5322G sits at the threshold between the complications line and grand complications, and the chiming alarm mechanism is what places it there. Number 22, Grand Complications Minute Repeater, reference number 5531G001. A minute repeater that chimes the local time. Not the time it was set to, but the actual current local time, automatically synchronized with the world time complication. This is a world first. No other watchmaker had solved this specific problem before the 5531G arrived. White gold, 40.2 millimeters, with a Cloisonne enamel dial depicting a Geneva cityscape, hand-painted over multiple firing sessions at temperatures that can cause the enamel to crack if the artist's technique is imprecise, meaning each dial is unique, and each one represents an irreproducible artistic achievement. The city ring and 24-hour indicator surround the scene. At $825,862 retail and trading between $900,000 and $1.2 million on the secondary market, the 5531G is the most technically innovative repeater in Patek's current catalog. The enamel artistry and the mechanical first all combine into a single reference whose value the market continues to revise upward. Number 23. Grand Complications Minute Repeater Tourbillon Perpetual Calendar, reference number 5207G001. 3 grand complications, 1 watch. The argument for the 5207G doesn't require embellishment. The movement inside speaks entirely for itself. The caliber RTO27PSQI combines a minute repeater, a flying tourbillon, and a perpetual calendar with moon phase in a single automatic movement. Each of these complications individually represents an engineering achievement. A minute repeater requires a precisely tuned acoustic system within the case. A flying tourbillon requires a rotating cage with no upper bridge, visually exposed, mechanically precise. And a perpetual calendar requires a gear train that models the Gregorian calendar's irregular month lengths and leap year cycle accurately for decades. Achieving all 3 simultaneously in a 41mm white gold case that still reads as a dress watch with Geneva seal finishing across 1,000+ components, that's the reason that this watch costs over $1 million. Secondary market between $1.2 million and $1.5 million. Every example that comes to auction is contested. All right, number 24, Grand Complications World Time Minute Repeater, reference number 5316-50P001. Now, if the 5207G is 3 grand complications in one case, the 5316-50P adds a 4th. world time, and surrounds it with cloisonne enamel artistry that places this reference in the company of horological museum pieces. Platinum, 40.2 millimeters, with a cloisonne enamel dial carrying perpetual calendar apertures, moon phase, and the world time city ring with 24-hour day-night indication. The caliber GS 36750 QIS FUS manages the minute repeater, chiming local time. It manages the perpetual calendar, the flying tourbillon, and the world time display from a single movement. The technical coordination required to run these 4 complications simultaneously, with each mechanism operating independently without interfering with the others, is the defining achievement of the piece. At $1,067,479 retail and trading between 1.2 and 1.6 million on the secondary market, the 531650P sits at the practical ceiling of what Patek produces for regular sale. Everything above this is made to order, or it's produced in numbers that defy any conventional market analysis. And finally, last but not least, number 25, Grand Complications Grand Master Chime, reference number 6300G010. 20 complications, 1,366 movement components, a reversible case with 2 complete dials, and one function that exists nowhere else in watchmaking, the date repeater, which chimes the current date on demand. A complication that Patek developed specifically for this watch and has never placed in any other reference. The caliber 300 GSAL 36750 QIS FUS IRM is manually wound and runs the Grand and Petite Sonnerie, chiming the hours automatically in 2 different patterns, alongside a minute repeater, the alarm with its own chiming mechanism, and the date repeater. Add the perpetual calendar, moon phase, second time zone, and power reserve indicators for both the movement and the strike train, and the total is 20 complications presented across 2 dials in a 47.7mm white gold reversible case with 18-karat white gold buckle and hand-stitched alligator strap. Development took years. Production numbers are so limited that they are effectively never disclosed. The secondary and auction market ranges from 3.2 million to over 5.5 million, with exceptional provenance examples exceeding that significantly at major auction houses. This is not an investment thesis. It is the most complex wristwatch ever made, and the market values it accordingly. 25 watches, every single one carrying the Geneva seal, every single one produced at a rate that ensures demand will always exceed supply. From entry sports watch to the most complicated wristwatch ever constructed, that tells you what Patek Philippe means as a manufacturer in 2026. Not just a brand, a standard. Subscribe. We cover the full depth of every major watch house like this, consistently and without hype. Also, drop in the comments which of these 25 you would actually put on your wrist. And we'll see you in the next one.